My name is Alex. I'm 58 years old. If you asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have told you it was steady, predictable, and safe. I had a wife, Irina, to whom I'd been married for 27 years. We had a son, Daniel, now 26, living in his own apartment. And I had a business I'd built with my best friend of 3 decades, Michael. Michael and I were practically brothers. We met in high school, served in the army together, and even stood side by side at each other's weddings. Over the years, we built a small but stable company repairing industrial machinery. Michael handled the finances, numbers were always his thing, and I took care of clients, contracts, and fieldwork. We didn't just work together. Our families were close. Michael's wife passed away more than 10 years ago, and since then, Irina and I would invite him over for dinners, birthdays, and even New Year's Eve. We shared not just profits, but life itself. At home, my marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but it felt solid. Irina was practical, calm, and the kind of woman who kept things running smoothly. She handled the household finances, made sure there was always food in the fridge, and even reminded me when it was time to see a doctor. About a year ago, I began to notice small changes. They were so subtle that at first, I told myself I was imagining them. Irina began staying out late more often, saying she was meeting her friends for dinner or helping her sister with errands. She bought new clothes, nicer than what she usually wore, and started wearing perfume I hadn't smelled before. One evening, I walked into the living room while she was on the phone. She quickly said, "I'll call you back," and hung up. When I asked who it was, she smiled lightly and said, "Just a friend from work." I let it go. After all, we were adults, and trust was something I'd always given her freely. But those little moments, a sudden end to a phone call, a vague explanation for being late, started piling up in my mind. Michael, meanwhile, seemed the same as always. We still had lunch together most workdays, still talked about football and politics. There was no hint, no clue, that he might be keeping a secret from me. The first real crack in the picture came one Thursday. Michael told me he'd be going on a short business trip to Kharkiv to meet a potential supplier. That same evening, Irina mentioned she'd be spending the weekend with her sister in the suburbs. I didn't connect the two events. Why would I? These were the two people I trusted the most in the world. 2 days later, I needed to call Irina's sister about a document. When she answered, she sounded surprised. "Alex? I haven't seen Irina in over a week. Is everything okay?" My mouth went dry. I made some excuse about mixing up the dates and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. But deep down, a cold thought began to take shape, one I didn't want to believe. When Michael returned from his trip, I asked him casually how Kharkiv had been. He hesitated before answering, then mumbled something about the hotel being nothing special. But when I asked for the name, he blinked, looked away, and said he couldn't remember. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I called an old friend who worked in security at a large hotel chain. I gave him the dates and asked if he could check the surveillance footage. I told him I suspected a client of lying. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. 3 days later, he sent me a short video clip. The footage showed Michael walking into a hotel lobby followed closely by Irina. They were laughing about something, not trying to hide a thing. I watched that clip over and over. Every time, I hoped to see some detail that would explain it. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe they had met by chance. But no. It was clear. They were there together. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to feel. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't confront them right away. For the first week after seeing that video, I walked through my days like a man sleepwalking. I still went to work. I still shared coffee with Michael in the mornings. I still came home to Irina in the evenings. But inside, I was watching. Listening. Waiting. I noticed more things. The way Irina's phone was always face down on the table. How she would take it with her, even into the bathroom. Michael, too, had started keeping his phone closer. If I walked into his office while he was texting, he'd flip the screen away. One evening, Irina said she was going to help her sister again. I told her I might join her after I finished some paperwork. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, then said, "No, don't bother. We'll be busy going through some old boxes in the attic." After she left, I sat in the quiet living room, staring at the wall. My mind was screaming at me to get in the car and follow her. But something inside me wanted undeniable proof before I crossed that line. The next morning at work, Michael looked tired. "Didn't sleep much," he said. "Stayed up late watching a movie." I nodded, pretending to believe him. By then, I had decided to dig deeper. I started with something simple, checking our business expense reports. Michael had always handled the finances, but I still had access to the company account. It didn't take long to find several charges at restaurants and hotels that had nothing to do with business. One of the charges was at the same hotel ID seen in the video. The date matched the supposed Kharkiv trip. Another was at a restaurant across town, a place Irina had once mentioned wanting to try. I copied everything into a folder on my laptop. A few days later, fate gave me another piece of the puzzle. Irina left her laptop open one morning while she was in the shower. Normally, I wouldn't even think of touching it. But my hands moved before I could stop them. Her Messenger app was open. At the top of the list was a chat with M. I clicked. The first message I saw made my stomach turn. "Last night was perfect. I wish we didn't have to hide." It went back months. Flirty jokes. Plans to meet when I was busy with work. Even photos, nothing too explicit, but enough to make it obvious. I closed the laptop quickly when I heard the water turn off. My hands were shaking. That night, I lay awake again, thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to throw the evidence in their faces immediately. Another part, the colder, more calculating part, told me to wait. To plan. A week later, I made my move. I called both Michael and Irina and told them I wanted to meet for lunch to discuss something important. I chose a quiet CAF on the edge of town, a place where no one would overhear us. I got there early and ordered tea. My heart was pounding, but my face was calm. When they arrived, I could see the surprise on their faces at seeing each other. They hadn't expected to both be invited. I let them sit. Then I placed a thick envelope on the table. "I know everything," I said quietly. "The only thing I want to hear from you now is how long it's been going on." They froze. Michael stared at the table. Irina's eyes filled with tears. Finally, she whispered, 6 months. It had just happened. I held up my hand. "Stop. Don't tell me it just happened. You made choices. Both of you." Neither of them spoke after that. I finished my tea, left enough cash on the table to cover it, and walked out. I didn't look back. Next came the hard part, dismantling the life ID built over 3 decades. I called my lawyer. Within a month, my divorce papers were filed. I also sold my share of the business to Michael for a fraction of its worth. I didn't want his money, I wanted him out of my life completely. The day I signed the final papers, I drove to a quiet park, sat on a bench, and just breathed. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for months. But the emptiness that followed wasn't relief. It was something else. It's been a year since that day. I live alone now in a smaller apartment. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine. I cook my own meals, pay my own bills, and spend weekends fixing up the place. There's a certain peace in simplicity. People often ask if I'm angry. The truth? Not anymore. Anger burns hot, but it burns out fast. What's left is colder. It's not hate. It's clarity. I see Michael and Irina for who they really are, and that's enough. Daniel knows the basics. I didn't tell him every detail, but he knows his mother and I divorced because of betrayal. He visits me often. We watch football, grill meat on the balcony, and talk about his work. He's careful not to mention his mother, and I don't push him to. Sometimes, late at night, I think back over the years. The birthdays, the holidays, the inside jokes with Michael. The quiet evenings with Irina after Daniel had gone to bed. And I wonder, were those moments real? Or were they just the surface, hiding something rotten underneath? Eve learned something important: betrayal isn't just about losing love. It's about losing the trust you thought was unshakable. Once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Last month, I saw Michael by accident. I was at the hardware store, and he walked in. He looked older, thinner. We made eye contact for a second. He opened his mouth like he might say something and then he turned and left. I stood there for a long time afterward, holding a box of screws, wondering if I should feel satisfaction. I didn't. I just felt nothing. A few weeks ago, Irina called me. She said she wanted to clear the air. I listened in silence as she talked about regrets, about how it wasn't worth it and how she missed the life we had. When she finally asked if I could forgive her, I said, I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. I ended the call. I'm not the same man I was before. I don't trust so easily anymore. But I'm also not bitter. Eve rebuilt my life in my own quiet way. And I'll leave you with this question, one I still don't have an answer to myself: can you ever truly forgive betrayal if the one who betrayed you was your best friend?